everybody. It's 5 after 5, so I'm not too sure how many more we'll have joining us, but I'll just ask everybody if you could mute and just turn your cameras off, just so that we're nice and stable here with what we're doing. If it inadvertently pops on, we'll turn it off for you in case you forget. And if there are any questions that we come into, or we need some, if somebody's presented a question and we need some further explanation, we'll just maybe ask you to unmute and offer that explanation or clarification to us. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight here we've got myself. My name is Jason Pratt. I'm the Executive Director of Karate Alberta. Also with us we have Heather Fiddick. She is the Vice President of Karate Alberta. She's also on the Karate Canada Board. If there are any technical questions that come up, she will most likely address those. Also, Dave Maffett, who is a member of the Karate Alberta Board of Directors, he'll take any questions as they relate to insurance. We did have a couple of insurance questions. Julie Hurd, I'd like to thank her for joining us. She is our sport consultant with formerly Alberta Sport Connection, and she's now a part of the Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation Division of Alberta Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women. Alberta Sport was rolled into that department a little while ago. And so we're here to answer any questions, go over the return to karate documents that have come out, as well as the latest guidelines from Alberta Health. So if you have a question, we did have a few questions that were submitted over the weekend, and earlier today we will address those. But by all means, if something comes up throughout this time while we're on, please put it in the chat. You can put it to everybody. If you would like to direct it just privately to me, that is fine as well. But yeah, feel free to, as questions come up, put them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that the entire time. So what has gone on most recently, as we all know, a bit of an unprecedented time, as that point has been hammered home on a number of occasions, and we're just starting to work our way back to some sense of normalcy over the last couple of weeks, and that will continue to we'll continue to get to a more normal sort of state over the coming months. But as we're all aware, on the 16th of March, we sent out a memo to our dojos just regarding how we were changing, or we wouldn't be sanctioning Karate Alberta events for the foreseeable future. And we'd sent some recommendations for our dojos if at that time they were going to continue on with in-person training. Timing as it was, a day later, the Alberta government through Alberta Health put out a public health emergency notice closing all recreational, community center and fitness centers. So at that point, our sort of memo cautioning people was really mute. It was a couple months after that, on the 26th of May, that Karate Canada published their guidelines and recommended protocols document for return to karate. And we had sent that out, we had posted that on our social pages as well, so that people could start to look at, how this was going to look if and when, not if, but when we were able to get back into the dojo and begin training again. On the 4th of June, we sent out a memo again to our head instructors and our dojos with a lot of reference to the Karate Canada document, Alberta Health Guidelines, as to how each individual dojo and each individual program could put together their own return to karate document with all of the best practices and recommendations from Alberta Health. On the 9th of June, the Alberta government, fortunately for us, moved sport and recreation and the associated recreation centers into phase 2 of Alberta's economic relaunch plan. And what that meant was that on the 12th of June, just a few days later, all of those recreation centers that were moved into phase 2 were able to open. As we all know, that it didn't occur necessarily on that particular day, and there's still a number of them that are not open, but are opening very shortly. On the same day, the 12th of June, Alberta Health put out guidelines for sport and recreation. And then there was a new update today from Alberta Health regarding guidelines for outdoor activities. So that has led us up to this moment. And one of the key things that people need to be or should be aware of is the Alberta Health Service guidelines for sport and for recreation. They are somewhat different than the guidelines for general recreation for the public. And specifically, inside of sport and recreation guidelines, there is something called a sporting cohort group. Inside these sporting cohort groups, which can be, when you include your coach, you include your head instructor, and all of your athletes, they can be groups of up to 50 that the physical distancing, the social distancing requirement of 2 meters is waived. And so it is not a requirement to stay at 2 meters if you are forming one of these sporting cohort groups of up to 50 students and your instructors. So what that essentially allows in the sport of karate is that inside that bubble, inside that group of 50, you can basically participate in all of the activities that you always had. Physical distancing is still a recommendation anytime it can be maintained, that 2 meters distance, but inside this sporting bubble, it is not an absolute requirement. So that's a big difference and a big change from where we were just a few weeks ago, and is quite relevant inside of our sport. So what was changed today on the 30th of June, and it was just, it just came out at about 3:30 p.m. during the press conference that Dr. Henshaw was on TV and a number of other platforms announcing. It had to do with outdoor activities, and it included outdoor sporting activities, which in the traditional sense doesn't necessarily include us, although our sport has always been able to operate outside in an outdoor environment. It's just not something that is as common of a practice in other sports. Regardless, the maximum group size for that, a number of weeks ago, it started at 50. In the middle of June, that number moved up to 100. And currently, as of today, for sporting activities outside, that maximum group size has moved up to 200. So, potentially that has an impact for our clubs who are operating and providing training outside. I don't imagine that many of us have up to 200 students outside in one class at any one time. But again, that changed as of 3:30 this afternoon. There's some key documents, and a number of them have been posted to our various sites and pages, and you can get most of these on the Karate Alberta webpage, but some of them are on the Alberta Health pages, such as our recommendations for creating a return to karate plan, the Karate Canada return, the recommended protocols document. Others that are not on our site, but that were linked to the memos that we sent out, were the Alberta Health Guidance for Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation, the Alberta Health Service Guidance for Cohort Groups, and the Alberta Health Guidance for Outdoor Fitness. And I'm just going to put all of the links, well, at least to these Alberta Health ones, into the chat for everybody. If they've not taken a look at them yet, you can just click on any one of those links there. And those are the most updated versions of those documents. So we did have, and again, sorry, I'm just going to pull up this one document here. When it comes to the cohort groups, there have been a couple questions around how exactly these work. And again, the link is in there. You can go and you can take a look on your own as well. But questions specifically around, you know, how does this work if you or any of your students operate or would like to operate inside of more than one cohort group? If you have students that are doing other activities, participating in a summer soccer league or going to summer camps and so on. Some of the initial discussion around cohorts, and again, still the recommendation is that they only participate in one sporting cohort group. The language now is, again, it still recommends that you only participate in one sporting cohort group, and that if you are, as an example, in a karate group, but you're also going to be in something else, is that you understand you're raising your level of risk by participating in more than one. And also, if you are going to participate in more than one, you should be trying to participate in cohort groups that are below that maximum allowable size. And that's, again, just to lower your risk of exposure, and as opposed to participating in, let's say, an outdoor soccer group that goes up to the maximum of 100 or 200 at any one time, and also a karate group that's at 50, and then also participating, let's say, in a summer camp with another cohort group. There's nothing saying that you cannot do that. It's just that that is not their recommendation, and that people doing that should understand that they are certainly raising their level of risk as it pertains to exposure to the coronavirus and the COVID disease. And I'll just ask Dave if he would like to just come on, because we did have a question around that came in from one of our members and dojos regarding outdoor training. And Dave, would you like to address that question? And it was as it pertains to insurance and outdoor training.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Karate Alberta has an insurance policy with Tool Pete through Markel Insurance for commercial general liability, and then we've got a sport liability policy. And Andrea Mychek is our representative there. She advised me that outdoor training is covered under the existing policy. However, we still need to comply with all the Alberta health orders. So the commercial general liability insurance, the athlete accident insurance policy is not location specific per se. So for those of you that were worried about moving your training from an indoor facility to an outdoor environment, you are still insured as you were in the past. But regardless, our insurance policies do not cover infectious diseases. Any contagion, anything like that is still not covered by insurance. So you do have to keep that in mind, that you're at risk yourself if there were to be a situation where an athlete or a group of athletes in your cohort could prove to the court that they contracted an infectious disease while training with your club.
Thanks, Dave. And as the point that Dave just mentioned, there's not an insurance coverage that is available really to anybody that covers infectious diseases or exposure at a time like this. It simply doesn't. It's just not available and out there. We did have and Dave did raise the point that you still need to be making sure that you are following all Alberta Health Services guidelines. Both the Karate Canada document and our recommendations in the memos that we sent out were guidelines for you to create your own plan, because your own particular situation, whether it be at your own dojo or a recreation center or a community hall, they all have different and very unique aspects of them that you would need to create your own plan specific to the location that you're at. What we gave was general recommendations that would be applicable in all settings, but then room that would allow you to create and individualize them for your own dojo or for your own club. We had a question regarding Zoom training or online platforms for training. And I don't know, Dave, if you would like to address this, or we could do that, or I could, or we could do that one together. But.
Yeah, no, happy to do it jointly, Jason. Again, Tool Pete advised that the insurance company is really in a new world and they're trying to get their minds around what the risk is. So the topic of virtual or online training is still an unknown to them. They're monitoring the situation with respect to claims and court decisions and such. What she told me today is what they are really dead against is any dojo offering public online training through a platform like YouTube or say Facebook, where the audience is not controlled, where anyone around the world could access that training, participate in the training, and possibly get hurt or allegedly be injured and then sue Karate Alberta, sue the dojo instructor for damages. She says it happens a lot, believe it or not, in other situations where people will go onto YouTube and supposedly hurt themselves and then sue the organization for their injuries. So definitely telling us that if you're going to do online virtual training, that it needs to be on a platform that you can control who accesses the training. So if it's Zoom, make sure that it's private, that it's by password, by invitation only with a password, that you know the participants, that they're all members of your club. And to that extent, then you're probably okay with your existing insurance policy. As soon as we have a situation where it's people from outside the club, it's tough to say whether you're going to be covered and protected by the insurance policy. And that's where the SurveyMonkey poll that we did here a few weeks ago, we asked questions around which platform are you using if you're doing virtual training, and are you controlling the participation to make sure that you're only instructing current members, or if there are new members or guests, that you are obtaining a waiver in advance to make sure that you're covered.
And what I'm just going to share my screen here with everybody. What we have are some waivers that were put together by the Canadian Olympic Committee for their national sport organizations, which were then sent out to the provincial, or allowed the provincial sport organizations such as ourselves, Karate Alberta, to access. And just as Dave was speaking about, their recommendation again is that you have a remote training waiver in place for your members for all the reasons that David just went over. And what we have here is a combined facility use and remote training waiver, which you can then edit and amend, you know, with your own club logo, your own club name, which speaks just to those points where, you know, in the remote training aspect, you know, you're acknowledging the risks inherent with that as it pertains to entering a facility now in the midst of a pandemic. There is language around COVID-19 and infectious diseases, which I think for the most of us, again, because this is all so brand new, I don't know if a lot of you had this as a part of your own registration waiver package with your clubs. Maybe you did, but if you did not and you're looking for it, we're going to put these copies up on our webpage so that you can access them, and then you can amend them specific to your own club. And so this one here is facility use and remote training. If you don't need one that has the remote training aspect to it, we do have another one here. And this one is, give me 1 second and I'll see if I can get that one up. No, I think I just did the same one here. Oh, that was the correct one. My apologies. So this one doesn't have anything to do with remote training if that's not an aspect of your organization that you're currently participating in, but you'll be able to access the other one if that is something that comes on board in the next while. But this one is just regarding facility use. It's just a waiver that references COVID-19 in through here. Another communicable, you know, the language is maybe infected with COVID-19 or other communicable illnesses, so on and so forth. And then the rest of the language would be something that you would be used to seeing in a normal kind of waiver. So a question from Andre regarding the insurance. I'll just, Dave, I don't know if the current policy, or I'm not sure if we've got the current policy. I should have just went and looked if we have that up and available on our webpage for you to just go and look at. But in terms of the details and what we're able to provide, we can make that available, I believe. I don't think there's a problem with that. Waivers, yep, we will fire that. Sorry, Dave, did you have, could you answer that? Yeah.
We can provide the detail around the wordings. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so the waivers, we'll have those on our Karate Alberta site here very shortly. It'll just take a day to get them up, and then you'll be able to download them. And as I said, it'll be a Word document that you can amend for your own facility. And Alberta Karate Association can attend Zoom training, not only members from your club. Daniel, could you clarify the statement you made in the
Sure.
chat there?
Yeah, David mentioned that only people from your club can be on the Zoom training. If I offer a Zoom training, only people from my club. But is it okay to have people from other club as long as they are part of Karate Alberta Association?
We can get clarification on that for you, Daniel, but I would think that, if they are registered Karate Alberta members attending another registered Karate Alberta's session, I would think that that would be okay. I think that would be no different than being a guest at someone else's dojo, which is a part of the normal course of everyone's training. We can get clarification as it pertains to Zoom, but I would think that that is probably okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, are waivers required was one of the questions that we had, and I think that it is. Whether or not it's an absolute requirement, it is really a best practice, and it is the recommendation, certainly, as everything is all very new in terms of Zoom training or remote training, that you do ask your members to sign a waiver. There are some inherent risks around it when you are not physically within a couple feet or even less that you'd normally be at your dojo, and you would want them to acknowledge that risk. So I think it would definitely be a recommendation that you do get those waivers signed. And I think if you have your own legal counsel that you refer to or reach out to when you're crafting your own club waivers, I mean, it's a question you could ask them, but I'm sure that any and all legal counsel would recommend that you do get waivers signed by your athletes. So, and I think that the acknowledgement of risk is also a good idea. As we mentioned earlier, there's no real insurance against infectious diseases, particularly here in this pandemic. So, but having that as a part of a waiver for your athletes to sign before they come back to the dojo would be a best practice as well. I'll just ask Heather, I know that you have been back with your group. You've been training outside. Is there anything that you would like to add in terms of return to karate preparedness or a plan? As part of the memos that we did send out to all of our dojos and head instructors, we did send you a sample copy of a return to karate plan, and it was Sensei Heather's from the South Calgary Club.
So what I've done is I've just taken that, implemented everything, and actually, although I've hosted the outdoor training, I actually had one of my other instructors teaching it. And she works for AHS, so I felt comfortable having her run the program. And she said everything went smooth. What we did for contact tracing was I just created my own little online form where that way I can, they fill out the assessment using the assessment tool. So I just copied the assessment tool from AHS into a form, and then they filled it out. Then that's how I collected my contact tracing and the form, so that it's all in one spot and it's recorded and that. So that's how I addressed that situation. And other than that, just followed the guidelines set out for entry, exit, hand sanitization, spacing, distancing, and it went over quite well. We had about 15 or 16 out for the training. I know that some of the dojos have had up to 20, 25 people, so that I've seen on some of their social media, so it's been great. And that's about it. Jason, you're muted.
It was brilliant, but I can't promise it will be the second time around. So Sensei Heather was recommending for those screening questionnaires that you're required to do before your kids come to training or practice, jot form, form site, and I just put it in the chat is another one. I mean, you can be doing manual ones. You can just be asking all of the questions in advance of them entering the dojo. It just speeds them up or speeds up entry if you're able to have everyone do that remotely and do it online, and the forms can be automatically sent into you. Alberta Health is asking that that information be kept for 2 weeks. As well as your attendance or your contact tracing lists. For a lot of us in the sporting community, we're used to taking and tracking attendance every practice time anyway, so it's really sort of second nature. But Alberta Health is asking that you keep that at minimum for 2 weeks, so that in the event that there is an outbreak, that they can use your tracing documents to see who is in those particular practices or classes at that time, who did they all come into contact with, and so on and so forth. There. So, Julie, you haven't had any questions yet so far. I don't know if you would like to, or if you had anything that you feel we've not gone over that you might like to address with our group.
I think you went over a lot of the stuff that we've been going over with the provincial sport organizations. Mostly when we've been doing a sit-down or round table, we've gone over general guidance, which is a lot of the stuff you guys have heard over and over again. Cohorts and mini leagues has been a big one. I'd say there's been a lot of, not a lot, but there's been some groups that have taken the guidelines and kind of just used them in a way that in their own interpretation. So they, I think just to reiterate, they are looking for people to stay within one sport cohort, knowing very well that they might be in a work cohort or school or something of that nature. If there is a possibility that you want to switch from one cohort to the other, just 2 weeks, not of isolation, but just of distance from that cohort before you switch to a new one. So if you did want to train with another group, they're just recommending that you have that time in between. The other questions we've been really getting is about the regions and travel. So if there was possibly a rural club and they had to travel a further distance, what that looked like. So that is available online. They've been using the Alberta Health Services zones for that. So it is something that I could post on the link there. They're not necessarily saying you have to stay within the zone, but they're recommending it. If you can keep athletes closer together rather than traveling large distances, then that's preferred, but that might not be realistic in Grand Prairie or up in that region there. So I'll post that link just in case.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. Andre had a couple other questions. So Andre, if it's easier, yeah, unmute yourself, yeah, and go right ahead.
Thanks, Jason. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you at Karate Alberta for all the effort you put into this and giving us an update. I understand it's a moving field, so a lot of hard work went into this, and I want to congratulate you on a great job done. Thank you. Also, I think it'll be very useful for us to have access to these documents that really lay out a professional organization. And when I say that, I'm thinking of our landlords. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of our dojos are not owned personal dojos, but we employ those made available to us through community centers and schools. In that instance, should we at some point enter into some sort of a negotiation with our landlord, these documents would go a long way in helping us make our case that we're serious about what we do. So that's great. This being said, and it is my case, I'm training out of a school. I have had discussion with the principal of the school, and that's also what I wanted to let you know of, since our school is actually the site for Karate Alberta competition training, as you are aware. So I've approached the school principal last week, and at the time, it was made very clear to me that he is not in a position to actually rent the facilities of the school to anyone outside of the school program, regardless of the activity, let alone karate, for a start in September right now. And he indicated that we should look at a plan B. Obviously, I'm not looking at a plan B because things are in such a state of flux that who knows, depending on how the curve goes, people in governments, provincial or municipal, may decide to go back to complete lockdown again, in which case all our discussion is moot, or conversely, go and open up, in which case, again, things will be much more streamlined. So it's very difficult for us to make a plan and to schedule anything. My intent is wait for perhaps the third week of July, and see where the rest of the world is, where Europe is, because that will probably tell the government what they want to do here to some extent, and then find out what the school decides to do. But this being said, should we not go into a situation where we can actually get access to these community facilities, does Karate Alberta already has engaged in discussions as to what they would do? Because I'm sure if there is a majority of dojos that cannot really train, that will have direct bearing on the functioning of this organization. And for us right now, we're actually doing some outdoor training in various parks of the city. So we can actually easily maintain social distancing, and we train, we use bows and things like that to make sure that people play and train, but obviously it's very different. And, you can't do that very, very for a long time in the fall because of the weather. Yeah. So there's a lot of pending questions, and I wasn't sure if you already had considered those issues and those complicating factors. For us personally, in our dojo right now, everything is depending on that position and that decision process, both coming from the government, municipal and provincial, and then the school boards. Yeah. So I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and that's something that we can definitely take back and have some discussion. Just as you said, things have been changing so rapidly, and just trying to keep on top of that has taken up a lot of time. And I am aware of various facilities that are ready to open up. Some have already opened up, some are opening up this coming Monday. Some have said later July, some have said for sport groups, nothing until September, and they're just not making any commitments whatsoever until that time, until, just as you said, they sort of see what is coming down the pipe from jurisdictions that are already, further along than this, and seeing where they are. So I guess there's a couple things. The recreation centers that I have had discussion with, or that I work with in some capacity or another, they are asking that all groups come, to the facility with a plan in hand. So and that they're, we've been in discussion, and I'm putting on a different sporting hat at the moment with them from essentially the day that they closed, keeping them apprised of where we were in terms of developing our plan, trying to find out what the facility would be asking for in terms of how they would manage people coming back in, and making sure that the two plans match. If your school is, and I know that some universities are with training sites are also in the same position, where they're not allowing students to come in, post-secondary as an example, they're having a hard time justifying them open up for sport groups in advance of that. So that definitely does present a challenge. I don't have an easy answer for you on that right now, Andre, other than we have put up a sample return to karate plan. This was before the new phase 2 guidelines from Alberta Health and the government, so it can be adjusted from there. And if there was a facility that you felt like it would be worth your while, us getting a hold of them and speaking to them around the Karate Canada guidelines, around the recommendations that we've put forward, and that how we're following Alberta Health Guidelines. If that would potentially help crack open the door for you, we'd be more than happy to do that. More than happy to do that.
Right. Well, I just think that for many of us, it might be a good idea at some point. And again, I think today is still premature based on what I said earlier, but maybe in a month or so, if Karate Alberta as an organization could contact the various school boards of our cities and say, just so you know, as a professional organization that is actually running sports responsibly, we have put in place measures. Please consider us in your deliberations when you're considering renting your facilities to organizations such as ours. Because I will do it from my end, but I think as an organization, if you can put pressure on another organization, and that would be, for Calgary, it's Calgary Board of Education as well as the Francophone School Board. You need to make sure both are involved. But it's in the other city, it's the same thing. I think that could potentially be helpful.
Yeah, there's no problem with that whatsoever.
Thanks.
And whatever we can do to help our clubs and get back to sport and get back to sport safely, that's not a problem at all. So we can definitely look at that, doing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't see any other questions popping up, but if anything comes up in the next couple minutes, by all means, put it in the chat. But what we will make sure we do, and if you've not already taken a look at the health services AHS map for the zones, Julie put that in the chat, but we will put more of this information on our site with some additional links. Again, a lot of these links were inside of the documents that we already sent, but we'll make sure that that is up and visible at our website, along with the new waiver documents that we showed you on the screen here just a couple minutes ago. And if you're finding that any one of our clubs and dojos, that it is in a public facility like a recreation center or a community center, and you feel like you're getting pushback from that particular building in terms of not wanting or being apprehensive about opening up to a sporting group, and if there's something that you feel Karate Alberta as a provincial sport organization could do to help you, in terms of a letter or a phone call, giving them some information as to the direction we are giving our members, such as the Karate Canada guidelines, our own guidelines, and Alberta Health, we're more than happy to do that. Because, Alberta Health has already said that there is a, in terms of sport and recreation, there is a safe way of doing this, understanding that there's always a certain level of risk, but, and that we would be committing to helping our clubs make sure they're following all of those guidelines. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. I guess I would open it to Julie, Heather, or Dave if they have any final comments, or again feel like anything was missed or glossed over that could use a further explanation. Then by all means we could do that now.
Jason, I'm good. I think we've addressed all the questions quite well. I really thank you, Andre, for letting us know about École Rose Sauvage, and then we'll wait till around the 3rd week of July to kind of figure it out, and it's basically just a waiting game to see how things go. And thanks for
Exactly.
staying on top of that for us.
Yeah, exactly. So Heather, you're still my contact for KA training sessions at the school?
Yeah, and I started putting together some concepts for the fall, and pretty much I haven't thought that we're going to be in the school till January 2021. So it aligns with what
Okay.
my thoughts are.
And I'm on email, so we'll communicate.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Dave or Julie, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add in terms of final comments before we wrap up.
No, I think you guys have some really well laid out documents and gone over a lot of the guidelines really well. So keep that up. But if there is any questions, any of you are welcome to call me, and happy to clarify anything.
Thanks, Julie.
I think we've got everything covered from my point of view. Jason, happy to help. We'll email out the policy wordings to all the dojo head instructors directly for their information. And Andrea from Tool Pete said she would update us as soon as she hears from the insurers on any changes with respect to their view of insurability, whether there'll be any additional premiums in the future for virtual training, risk that they may perceive needs to be added, I guess, in the future. But at this point, nothing to worry about.
Great, good. Okay, well, thanks everybody for your time tonight. And, you know, I'd like to thank Julie from Alberta Sport and Dave and Heather for coming in. So appreciate it, and appreciate everybody that, as I said, from our instructors and our dojos that made the time to come on here. And by all means, if there's something else that pops up over the next little while or that you'd like some clarification on, you can email me or anyone who is on this call, and be happy to offer that clarification too. Great.
Great. Thank you for your
Thank
help.
you guys. Have a great night. Okay. Bye-bye.